Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. From this video, I will discuss about the formation of thoracic cavity and the diaphragm. So before going into detail, first I will explain what is septum transversum is. In this diagram, look at the first picture. You can see this orange color one is the septum transversum. Septum transversum is a thick plate of mesodermal tissue which occupies the space between the thoracic cavity and the stalk of the yolk sac. From my previous video also I showed you what is septum transversum is. So here look at this diagram. Here in the first picture you can see this is the septum transversum, this brown color one, and here you can see the septum transversum is has increased in size and the liver bud grows inside the septum transversum. So the septum transversum is a mesodermal tissue which occupies space between the thoracic cavity and the stalk of the yolk sac. This septum is derived from the visceral or splanchnic mesoderm. Although it is in between the thoracic cavity and the stalk of the yolk sac, it does not separate the thoracic and abdominal cavity completely. After the formation of initial primitive body cavity, the primitive body cavity is like this. So, this has to be divided into upper thoracic cavity and the lower, the peritoneal or the abdominal cavity. So, for the division, there must be a structure to divide the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity separately. Although the septum transversum is there in between the thoracic cavity and the stalk of the yolk sac, it does not completely separate this thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. So there is an opening in between the abdominal cavity and thoracic cavity, and this opening is called as the pericardioperitoneal canal. Here in this diagram, first picture, you can see the pericardioperitoneal canal here. This is the pericardioperitoneal canal behind the septum transversum. So you can see this is the here there is the foregut, and on each side of the foregut there is the foregut. This is the foregut. Sorry, this is the foregut. This one is the foregut, and on either side there are two canals, the pericardioperitoneal canals. So what happens is when the lung bud begins to grow, they expand uh, caudally and laterally within the pericardioperitoneal canal. Within this pericardioperitoneal canal, lung buds grow like this, caudally and laterally, like this. As a result of the rapid growth of the lungs caudally and laterally, what happens is the space of the pericardioperitoneal canal become too small and the lungs begins to expand into the mesenchyme of the body wall dorsally and laterally and ventrally. Here in the second picture you can see the growth of the lung bud. Here is the pericardioperitoneal canal and you can see the growth of the lung buds here. Then you can see the pleuropericardial fold. Pleuropericardial fold. This folds grows like this in this direction. You can see the pleuropericardial fold. First, these folds are very small ridges projecting into the primitive undivided thoracic cavity, but with the expansion of lungs, the mesoderm of the body wall splits into two components as the definitive wall of the thorax and the pleuropericardial membrane, which are the extensions of the pleuropericardial folds that contain common cardinal veins and the phrenic nerve. This pleuropericardial fold contains common cardinal veins and the phrenic nerve. These pleuropericardial folds grow towards the midline like this and they fuse together. Then they fuse with each other with the root of the lungs, and then thoracic cavity is divided into definitive pericardial and 2 pleural cavities by this pleuropericardial fold. Pleuropericardial means in between pleura and the pericardial cavity. So, pleuropericardial folds divides the thoracic cavity into pericardial cavity and the 2 pleural cavities. That is the process where thoracic cavity formation occurs. What happens? First, there was the septum transversum, but the septum transversum is not completely divide the thoracic cavity from the does not completely separate the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. There is a space which is called as pericardioperitoneal canal on each side of the midgut, on each side of the foregut. And what happens is then the lung buds grows in the pericardioperitoneal canal caudally and laterally. With the growth of the lung bud, there is pleuropericardial fold grows towards the midline in between the lungs and the heart, separating the thoracic cavity into a pericardial cavity and 2 pleural cavities by the pleuropericardial fold. Then we have to discuss about the formation of the diaphragm. Before going into formation of the diaphragm, here you can see the formation of the thoracic cavity and the division into pericardial and pleural cavities clearly. Here you can see the primitive thoracic cavity and there is primitive pleural cavity here, 2 pleural cavities, and the here the pericardial cavity is there. Although the thoracic cavity divides as a pericardial and pleural cavities, the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity are still communicate with each other via pericardioperitoneal canal, via this pericardioperitoneal canal. Still there is a communication between the abdominal cavity and the thoracic cavity via this pericardioperitoneal canal. So during further development, this opening between the prospective pleural and peritoneal cavities are closed by crescentic fold, which is known as the pleuroperitoneal fold. Pleuroperitoneal fold. This is the pleuroperitoneal fold. This blue color one is the pleuroperitoneal fold, which projects into the caudal end of the pericardioperitoneal canal. Gradually, these folds extends medially and ventrally. Medially and ventrally. Gradually, these folds extend medially and ventrally. Therefore, by the 7th week, they fuse with the mesentery of the esophagus with the septum transversum. Here you can see these pleuroperitoneal folds have fused together with the mesentery of the esophagus and also with the septum transversum here. Therefore, the connection between the pleural and peritoneal portions of the body cavities are closed by the pleuroperitoneal membranes. Don't mix up with these names. This is the pericardioperitoneal canal and this is the pleuroperitoneal fold. And after closure, this is called as the pleuroperitoneal membrane, not the fold. Then further expansion of the pleural cavities relative to the mesenchyme of the body wall adds a peripheral rim to the pleuroperitoneal membrane. This red color one is that peripheral rim. With further development, mesenchyme of the body wall adds a peripheral rim to the pleuroperitoneal membrane. Once this rim is established, myoblasts originate from somites at cervical segments 3 to 5, penetrate the membrane and form the muscular part of the diaphragm. This peripheral rim derived from the body wall forms the muscular part of the diaphragm. So now you can see the diaphragm is derived from several structures. There are 4 structures which contributes for the formation of the diaphragm. First one is the septum transversum, which forms the central tendon of the diaphragm. Then 2 pleuroperitoneal membranes. These are the 2 pleuroperitoneal membranes. Those are the second one. Then third one is the muscular components. Muscular components from somites at the cervical segments 3 to 5. That is the third part. Then mesentery of the esophagus. Mesentery of the esophagus is the fourth part. Mesentery of the esophagus is the fourth part, which gives rise to the crura of the diaphragm. Crura of the diaphragm are developed from the mesentery of the esophagus. During the fourth week, what happens is the septum transversum lies opposite to the cervical somites, and then therefore the nerve components, the C3, C4 and C5 of the spinal cord grows into the septum. So the nerve supply comes from those segments, and those segments are the components of the phrenic nerve, which pass into the septum through the pleuropericardial folds. Although the septum transversum lies opposite to the cervical segments during fourth week, by the sixth week, during fourth week, the septum transversum lies opposite to the cervical segment, but by the sixth week, remember, by the sixth week, with the developing of the diaphragm, that comes to the level of thoracic somites. Therefore, the repositioning of the diaphragm is caused by the rapid growth of the dorsal part of the embryo. And the nerve supply to the diaphragm, which is motor and sensory innervation, comes from the phrenic nerve. That is the formation of the development of the diaphragm. Hope you could understand clearly about the formation of the thoracic cavity and the division of the thoracic cavity into pleural cavity and the pericardial cavity, as well as the development of the diaphragm. So, thank you for watching.